Y'all, welcome back to Kentucky Fried Wargaming, where two guys who aren't qualified to talk about anything decide to talk about a game with hard math and chance. I'm Joe.
And I'm John.
And this week we're continuing on with the 9th episode of our beginner wargaming hobby guide. Trying to guide new folks getting into the hobby through this arduous process of figuring out tabletop wargaming, and specifically using the two largest tabletop war games as an example in Age of Sigmar and Warhammer 40k. We've had a number of episodes up till this point, some that are really game specific, but I'd like to think that most of our topics have been kind of game agnostic, don't you think?
Yeah, I think they're concepts you can bring when you play other games, Malifaux, Warmahordes, whatever. Like, there's a lot of concepts in here that transfer to other war games, even tabletop RPGs or video games. Like, there's a lot of nebulous stuff in these episodes. So
yeah, and I think this is just going to be another episode just like that won't necessarily apply to any one system or another, but rather general hobby advice to help people keep going. In the last episode, we spent a whole lot of time sitting down and working through how to navigate the social contract and to get a pickup game in a way that both you and your opponent, whoever that may be, has a good time, and some tips and tricks that might help you to kind of orient yourself into that process so that we arm you for success, to have the most fun that you can with whatever time you get to play with your little figures. So as we've done with all of these episodes, we kind of sat down and we thought about our journeys into the hobby and sort of in what order we did things, and then try to anticipate what you're going to need next. So at least from our very, very tenuous reckoning of what y'all might be doing, we expect that if somebody has, found a game store that they can play games at, and they've sort of felt comfortable enough to play a pickup game or a couple of games with some strangers, or maybe found a group of friends who you're playing with and you've had a couple of games under your belt and you're just getting into this, and you've also built some models, maybe painted some models, and you've kind of got your feet wet, as it were. You're almost no longer a beginner. But at this point, I think at least the wall that John and I both ran into when we were getting into the hobby and hit this stage was we started to absolutely mess up. I mean, big goofs all over the place.
Biggest oof.
Yeah, whole lot of those. So much so that I will use the term that is commonly used. We started to run into failures. We'd make some attempts at stuff and they just wouldn't pan out. And I think that's something that's worth talking about, because how you look at this is largely going to determine how much fun you have in the hobby for a long, long time ahead of you. And we want to orient you on the right path. Right, John?
Yeah, absolutely. Failure will be an integral thing that you're going to get used to through the entire hobby experience. But it's kind of, we'll get into it very deeply in this episode, of changing your perspective on that and how your relationship with failure specifically in this hobby and what that means, how to adjust it. And the best way I can kind of explain in a short sentence is failing forward instead of letting your failure stop you.
Yeah, I mean, you fall down or you fail forward. Those are pretty much your options. And in this instance, I would like to try to make the case for failing forward. So I guess to start all of this off, we should probably start with a baseline. We got to lay the foundation. What do we mean when we say failing in terms of tabletop wargaming or just learning this hobby? What exactly do we mean by that? And the short answer is, as John said earlier, this is another nebulous concept. It's something that takes different forms depending on what topic you're doing at the time, or I guess I should say what part of the hobby you're doing at the time, depending on the person. But the universal truth to all of it is that there's going to be a lot of failure in the hobby, regardless of what you do. Whether you're gaming, whether you're building, whether you're painting, you are going to fail. It's gonna be how it is. I can guarantee it. And I think in many places that's considered a bad thing, in many other hobbies, but here, I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think that at first it's very disheartening, and there are periods of time in which if you make repetitive failures and you don't keep check on yourself, it can be very disheartening. But I think overall, it can grow. Almost every failure you're going to make in this hobby is an opportunity. It is not a death sentence, for lack of a better way of putting it. Some examples is say you mess up a model, you put too thick of paint on a model, and you're like, oh no, it's ruined. I'm gonna have to buy a whole new kit, and I'm done. No, you don't. You can just strip the model using some stripper, brush it with an old toothbrush that you're not gonna use for brushing your teeth ever again, and then try again.
Yeah,
there are ways to salvage things in this hobby. It's not an end all be all.
Yeah, nothing's totally lost. Unlike if you're into competitive video gaming, you play MOBAs or shooters where you go into a match and you play your ranked match and you either won or you lost. And if you lost, that's it. Game over. It's on your record.
Your rating is lower now. Yeah.
There's nothing you can do about that. You can queue up and try again, but there's nothing you can do to salvage that game. And I think that breeds a certain mentality or a certain mindset around the concept of failure. And I want to try to, as we go through this, I want to try to divorce some of those inherent connotations from the word failure. Because I think John put it best. There's nothing you do in this hobby, no failures, no mess ups, no goofs, that can't be fixed. All of them can. You just got to let yourself do so. So let's get into kind of the nitty gritty of it. John already mentioned a good example, so we'll start there. So in terms of hobbying, what do we mean by failure? We'll go with John's first, just to reiterate, you're going to build stuff wrong, especially if you're new to modeling in general, not just tabletop wargaming, but you didn't build model cars or model planes, or in my case, Zoids as a kid.
I love Zoids.
I was looking at a Liger Zero model online the other day. I'm really trying to tell myself not to buy one.
Do it.
Let me just go ahead. Spoiler alert. I'll buy one. But if you've never built models before, you're gonna mess one up. You're probably going to mess up a couple. You're going to cut a bit in the wrong place, or you're going to glue two pieces together that you then quickly realize shouldn't be put together. Or you're going to arm something with the wrong weapons or whatever.
Or you're me and you take the turret-mounted guns for Astra Militarum tanks and you put them in upside down. The whole mounted guns, not the turrets, the whole mounted guns, the multi-meltas or heavy bolters, and you'll put them in upside down and not realize it until you've put the whole thing together and you look at it and go, oops.
But, I mean, that's kind of the nice thing here, is we're just handling some plastic. All of that can be fixed. If you use super glue to put them together, you can just get some, super glue dissolver, put it right in there, it'll come apart, no problem, no harm, no foul. Even if you used plastic cement and you stuck stuff together, you could kit bash around it. It's okay. You could take some clippers to it, clip anything you need to. You could fix it. It's going to be okay.
Make it a feature instead of a bug.
Yes, it's a happy accident, as our patron saint of hobbying, Bob Ross, has told us.
One of the lost Primarchs.
Bob Ross, 20th Primarch. You really can't mess anything up permanently there. It's gotta be okay. And even if you clip something and you ruin a bit, it can be salvaged with a little creativity. I'll give you an example. I recently was working on some Krieg guardsmen that I was putting together. And I accidentally snipped half of this guardsman's leg off, like just at the knee. And didn't mean to. And when I clipped it, as bits will sometimes do, there was a sort of like the clipping sound of my clippers, and then there was a flying noise, and plastic clinked somewhere in the room behind me, and I will never find that thing again. So, gluing the leg back on, not an option. But what I did do was I grabbed one of my leftover little laser guns they carried around, and I cut it in half, and then I stuck the barrel to his leg, almost as if that's his peg leg now, like some terrible field medic patch-up job to keep him moving. And the model looked cooler now because of that, and it worked out. And I think how you react to that's going to depend on whether you kind of keep the ball rolling and fail forward, or whether you fall down and kind of stop what you're doing.
Yeah, a lot of people, and I'm even guilty of this when I first started, would look at that and go, I messed up, I have to get a whole new one, it's over. You kind of initially make that jump to, it's ruined. I destroyed this thing. I failed, I messed up. And that can be very disheartening, instead of looking at it as an opportunity. And our whole idea behind this episode as a whole is looking at situations you would have normally gone into while hobbying and going, man, I ruined that. And instead looking at it as an opportunity to be creative, to express yourself, to do something different, to make something interesting.
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
the best way of handling it, I think so. But, Joe, I believe it's not just with hobbying that you can fail, right?
I mean, well, not necessarily, but I think it is probably going to be your big one. You know what I mean? You're going to build stuff wrong. You're going to paint stuff wrong. Oh, God.
Oh, I still paint stuff wrong. It's great.
Yeah. That's the thing you're going to do. You're going to paint some stuff wrong. Or maybe, nothing's ever inherently wrong, but maybe you paint something and you don't like the way it looks when you get to the end. It's fine. Plot twist. It's fine. No problem, y'all. You could strip it and it won't hurt it at all. You can just pull that paint right off there. Or maybe you don't need to strip it. Maybe you just dislike the color of one little piece. You can repaint that one little piece. No worries.
Or maybe you started a specific Space Marine army that you just decide a month later that you're not as into, and you want to start this other Space Marine army. So you just strip the whole army and make a whole, this other army.
John, don't come at me. Don't come at me. Don't go check the Instagram and see me painting salamanders when I've spent the past 7 episodes talking about blood angels. Don't look at that. You see nothing
Whoopsies.
behind this curtain. Yeah, you could that's the thing you could do. And it doesn't have to hurt anything. You didn't lose any money on these models. It's fine. But I think what John was kind of alluding to is there is more ways to fail in hobbying than just failing when you're building something or when you're painting something incorrectly. You might fail to hobby at all. And I think that's kind of something, at least I can't speak for everybody, but that I'm kind of struggling with during this pandemic period is, y'all, the world's kind of in a weird place. And at least for me, sometimes it is hard to get together the want to paint or to build or to just do anything hobby related. And sometimes you might just fail at doing hobby. You just might not even have the gall to get started. And that's going to happen sometimes. And I know some different groups online would disagree, but don't beat yourself up about it too much. You can use that as a way to get yourself hobbying more. For example, if you have an army that you were painting before and all of a sudden you just poof, you lose that motivation, and if it's something that doesn't feel good, if you genuinely feel bad for not painting, just use that as a way to try to convince yourself to set aside a little bit of time, just a little bit of time, and do it as regularly as you can. Make a little schedule for yourself, because at least I find that sometimes if I could just start, I will keep going for quite a while. If I could just get the first bit of paint on my brush, I'll probably keep going for a little while.
Or you get your first dude, like, built, you'll be more inclined to want to build the rest of the box of dudes.
Yeah, it is very hard for me to, like, just build one guy of, like, a 10-man squad. Once I build one, my brain just, must do more. And I then have to do more. And that's going to be something that you're going to struggle with as you go through the hobby forever. But if you have the right mindset, as instead of kind of beating yourself up and like, oh, I'm not even hobbying, maybe I should stop. Like, no. But you're upset about not hobbying, so you shouldn't stop. You can redirect that into something more productive and to cut yourself a break. Because otherwise, you might lead yourself into burnout, which is a topic for another episode we'll get to later, but nobody wants that. But, John, what about gaming? Like, we talked about how in a video game, losing in a competitive ranked match or whatever is going to hurt you. What could you do in this setting in terms of gaming to fail?
We're going to talk about rules? I love talking about rules.
Oh, yes, I know. We can talk about rules. I release the...
So, invariably, you will play this game. You will build these models, you will paint them, you'll make these little awesome figures, and you're all going to have your own specific stories for your own specific dudes, and you're going to play somebody else's specific stories and specific dudes. And you're going to play this game. You've probably read up on your rules. You've probably tried playing a couple of small games. Invariably, you'll probably reach for the stars and play a bigger game, and it'll be a nightmare. You will make mistake after mistake, and you will think that this is just not for you, that you're the worst at this, and you shouldn't play it. You're wrong.
Yeah.
Hate to burst your bubble. Everybody does that. I still do that. There are some times where if I'm playing a new faction, where I haven't played a faction in a long time, I will misread a rule, or I will misinterpret a rule, or I will think that my idea is better than it is.
Oh yeah, all the time.
And it'll fail. I'll do something crazy, like send 20 Khorne Berserkers up the center of the table and going, yeah, once they get into melee, they're going to eat everyone to death, but then realize I have another 24 inches to go before I can get to their gun line. And then they're all shot off the table. That will happen. You will do that. And it's important to look at those opportunities as ways to learn. Both the enemy's faction, how your faction responds to certain things, how the rules interact with each other, some tips and strategies that you can use and share with other people and kind of discuss, and you can have a good time with. Failing while hobbying is an opportunity for creative, change. Failing while gaming and with the rules is an opportunity for growth in learning how your faction works. Even if you're playing casually, rules you're going to want to know, and you're going to want to have a comprehensive ability with your rules, even casually, because a game can be more fun and you can do crazier stuff the more you understand how your faction works. And it doesn't have to be hyper efficient competitive, but you can be very well versed in what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, at least for me, some of the rules that stick out in my head the most are the ones that I initially got wrong, and I had to go look up in a book. And sometimes multiple times I had to look rules up, and I had to look the same rule up in the same book. It's something that's going to happen, especially if you're newer, or if you're playing a new faction, or you're trying a new system. You're gonna mess rules up. It's gonna happen all the time. As you get more comfortable, it might happen less often, but you're still gonna do it. And using that as a way to gently correct yourself will eventually grow your knowledge slowly but surely, rather than kind of beating down your enjoyment of the hobby. And your opponent's gonna do the same thing. And I would encourage you to help them do exactly what I'm advising. Don't beat them up if they get a rule wrong in a casual setting. Use it as an opportunity to grow. Look the rule up in a book for them, or give them the time to look it up. Talk about it. It's fine.
We've discussed it in another episode of, taking a step back in a game. If you made a mistake, you can see the mistake, you can take a step back and redo it.
Yeah.
Like, that's okay. That's perfectly fine. Don't feel bad about doing it. We still do it all the time.
Oh yeah, last game John and I played together, prior to the plague, he was playing Black Legion, and he gets a bonus for being near his hero. Like, his hero pushes the guys to shoot better. And when he did his move, he accidentally moved outside of that hero shoot, out of that outside. Hero buff range. Yeah. He wasn't thinking about it, and in moving everything, he done goofed, and he moved his stuff outside of the hero's buff range, even though he didn't mean to. So in that moment, when he, gets to his shooting phase and goes, "Oh no, I messed up. I thought that range was longer. I have moved out." Could I have been a turd and been like, "Oh, too bad. No bonus shooting for you in this casual game with no money on the line, friend"? Or I could do what I did. Say, "Hey man, just scooch him back. It's cool. Whatever. It's fine." And now I bet you he'll remember that aura more. Well, actually, he probably won't because it's John. But any other person would remember that aura better.
A normal person would.
Somebody else would probably recall it better. That's something that you can do to grow. And I promise you, if you keep that mindset with every rules mistake you make, you are going to get better because of it. Because all of the mistakes you can make rules-wise because you done made them. And that makes you an expert. And I think that's pretty cool.
And by failing to understand rules at times and then doing them in practicality to learn them better will help you better understand rules in the future. When you read new books or start a new faction, or maybe your friend that's getting into the game after you've been playing for a year or two wants to start a faction you know nothing about, so you start going over the book with them, and they've got questions. Maybe you can have answers because you understand how that works, because the rules all kind of share similarities in wording and how they function. That's all fringe benefits of just kind of doing the thing, even though you'll probably fail, and then learning from failing at the thing.
Yeah,
because if you just sit and wring your hands about, "I don't know the rules, I gotta memorize the book, I gotta read the book 6 times," you're still gonna fail. There is not any world in which you don't go onto the table and have some mess up. You can have the flashcards, you can have notes, you can have everything. You will still mess up. And that's okay. It's all about mitigating how much you mess up. And if you're looking at doing tournaments, the best way to be able to play a list or an army to a tournament level is repetition and
practice.
And all practice is failing in different ways so that you know how to respond to it when you're at the tournament. That's all it is.
Yep. It kind of ingrains it in your head. So don't be afraid to kind of just jump off the ledge and keep playing multiple games, even if you're making small mistakes. It's fine, I promise. Or, sometimes in terms of gaming, the only mistakes you make aren't necessarily going to be rule-wise. For some people, you might view losing as a failure, even in a casual setting. And I think if you are someone who thinks that way, or you sort of you tend towards that mindset, I think you could very quickly find yourself in some trouble if you don't try to, rearrange your thought process around that, especially in terms of just having fun casual games in this hobby. If you view every loss as a failure, you're going to have a rough go of things, especially when you're a beginner, because you are just not going to have the knowledge base of a more experienced player.
Yeah, especially people of that mindset that have, "I gotta win." Winning it means I did the thing right. Failure will feel worse. Failure will feel like losing a game will feel like you don't even want to do this thing. It'll be hard to contextualize and it'll be hard to handle. But losing games is as important as winning games, because the games that you win means you did something right. The games that you lost are opportunities for you to learn how to better handle different situations in the future. Generally, people that kind of get upset when they lose are more competitive minded. You can still play casual games as a competitive-minded person. That's perfectly fine. But remember that as a competitive-minded person, losing is integral to being better. And don't look at it as a reason for you to be beating yourself up. Like, it's okay. You can improve by losing, and it just happens to be in a casual environment. It means your other opponent probably had a really good time because they got to do a thing against you.
Yeah, and I think the ways that you could kind of get to that opportunity of learning after a loss, you kind of have to allow yourself to. At least, I come from a place where, high school sports and stuff are really common. And I think, at least in my experiences there, a lot of the people I played with, when we would lose a scrimmage or an actual game, would be so caught up on the fact that we lost that they lost sight of the opportunity to learn something about what happened. So even if we, watched the tape of what happened at the game, people were just so upset that they lost that they couldn't learn anything from it. And the same thing will happen to you here if you allow it to. If you just absolutely worry about it and beat yourself up, you will not see the chance you have to talk to your opponent after the game and learn where you messed up. This is something that we talked about in a previous episode a little bit. But John and I are big proponents of post-game chats.
Or even during game chats. Like, if you take a break just after a turn to go talk to each other about what's going on. And I think that's, like, Joe touched on a very important part. If you lose a game and your opponent beats you, presumably if you lost a game, which means they saw where you made your mistake, then if you can't recognize where you made it, ask them.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in a casual setting with, like, a group of friends that you're playing with all the time. And if you're like, hey, that thing that you did, like, at what point in the game did you realize that you had an opportunity to win? And what did you capitalize on? What did you respond to that I did? I want to know so that I can kind of formulate what to do next time. That's perfectly okay. And having those kind of conversations with your opponent not only builds respect for them and yourself, but it builds this kind of camaraderie of you both trying to help each other improve.
Yeah.
Which is very important in a game like this, a social game like this.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're in a club setting where you're going to be playing against the same people week after week after week, or in like if you have like a friend setting where you play with the same people week after week after week, those conversations are kind of like a rising tide, and they lift all the boats. And if I lose to John and then I ask him, what did I do wrong? And he explains it to me, I'm not going to make those same mistakes next time. And I'm going to get a little better, which means I'm going to put more pressure on him the next time we play. And he's going to have to get a little better. And we have this slowly escalating rate of competency as this happens and goes on.
Arms race of learning.
I will study harder than you. Just at home, instead of lifting weights, doing flashcards for what all my character profiles are. I'm going to fail every time, but I'm looking at them, coming for you, John. I'll remember my aura.
Yeah, and you can use those situations to propel conversation within your community with other players, maybe other players that weren't at that game, to talk to them about some stuff, and it's all an opportunity to enjoy this thing that we're all doing. It's just, it is not the end of the road. It does not mean that you have ruined it for yourself. It is just another, like, stone in the cobblestone street, for lack of a better way of putting it, of just, it's a part of it. Learn to accept it, learn to live with it, learn to use it to your advantage, and not let it kind of shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah, agreed. Totally agreed. But I think that kind of leads us to a place that I want to touch on that kind of surprised me as I grew in the hobby. It was something I didn't really anticipate, but it's something that I think many people kind of come across as they go from what I would call a beginner to someone who is, an avid tabletop wargamer or hobbyist, is that as you grow in this hobby, your definitions for failure are going to change. And while it's weird, I just want to kind of preempt everybody, it's totally fine. What I consider a failure now compared to what I considered a failure when I was a new player are totally different. And that's in both hobbying and especially in gaming. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. When I first started playing, I was a teenager, and so my concept of failure while gaming was just losing a game. My concept of failure was, oh no, I lost a game, I'm terrible. Now my failure is more of when I play a game and my opponent doesn't have a good time with me. Maybe I brought too strong of a list and I kind of curb stomped them and they just kind of felt bad. I see that as a failure to me. And I, as a more veteran player, can find a way to bring a strong and fun list that's still fun for my opponent to play against. And I can use that as an opportunity to better learn how to do so. I like to call it a competitively casual, or casual competitive, where you're still playing casual games, but with a competitive-ish mindset, just not win at all costs.
Yeah, and I think I'm in a similar boat. Whereas when I first started, I had a similar mindset where if I lost, that was failure. But much like John, if I absolutely destroy somebody, that's a terrible failure on my part. I came too hard. I needed to tone my list down. But also, if I brought a really net list E-list, and what I mean by that is a common list that everybody just plays because stuff is good, that's a failure for me. At least I feel that way. I feel like I should, at this point in the hobby, kind of push myself to play different things. Maybe some weird stuff, or maybe some stuff that I just think is cool, and find a way to make it work. I like sort of big stompy monsters, and I know that they might not be the most competitive thing, but if I were to set those things aside for just what is good, I now feel that's a failure, regardless of whether I won or lost. That has just morphed for me over time. And I think a lot of people end up going through that journey. I think the end points are different for everybody, but I don't know a single person in the hobby who has the same sort of failure states, if you'll allow me that term, as they did when they started. It's just going to change.
It constantly shifts and morphs, even with hobbying. Your skills will improve as you paint more models and build more models and get more stuff. So your idea of failure will also grow. You'll push yourself to get better, and it's important that you do so. Same thing in gaming, same thing with the rules, same thing with your community. There's going to be problems and failures along the way, and it's important to not look at them as, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, don't look at them as like failures in other hobbies would. Look at them as a opportunity. But that, Joe, I think that kind of leads us into our final point, doesn't it?
I think it does. And I think it's something we've touched on on and off as we've gone through this, but I kind of want to put a bow on this point. Y'all, I disagree with the premise of the title of this video. I know that kind of the common nomenclature that folks use for kind of messing up is sort of failing, but in this particular hobby, because it's a sort of personal and creative endeavor, I don't think that the things we listed above are failures. I think I fundamentally disagree with that term. I think the only sort of failure that I would put here is the failure to recognize all of these little opportunities. Someone put that in a Hallmark card.
What we got here is a failure to communicate.
Yeah, I think it's these things, I wouldn't even call them failures. I know some people are tempted to, And that's kind of, at least that's how I was conditioned to view these things when I first
think
came into the hobby.
Most people are conditioned to think that way.
Yeah, and I don't know what that is.
I think it's a social thing to do with gaming in general, is that there are successes and failures. Even look at like tabletop RPGs. It's literally written that, like for a dice roll, like it's a success or a failure.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think while that's probably what people are coming into this thinking, I think we could shift that thought structure. I think us here in the hobby as a community have the chance to change how we view that. And I would argue it is imperative that we do so, because all of the above failures are really just mistakes that springboard you to success. I mean, I the only way I ever got better at this hobby was by making the above mistakes.
Well, it's like the whole concept of with art in general. Like when kids start making art when they're younger, it doesn't look great. Let's be honest. Most kids' art doesn't look like a Picasso, doesn't look like a super well done thing. But everyone starts somewhere, and if you're mean to yourself or someone else is mean to you when you start doing a thing, you're gonna get discouraged and disheartened because you're trying to express an emotion or something through an art, and painting miniatures is still an art. So be nice to yourself. Like, allow yourself to grow. Allow yourself to make mistakes, because it's the only way you'll improve. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day. All these different adages and metaphors that we have, it all kind of ties to the single point of it's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes, and allow yourself to improve. Allow yourself to express yourself artistically. And if there's somebody out there who's telling you you're terrible, you should just stop doing this, they're wrong.
Yep, absolutely. Positively wrong. And also, they're a turd. Scientifically a turd. I'm a scientist. I ran the numbers. I checked the math. They're a turd.
Yes. I'm a janitor, and so I'm blue collar, and I'm telling you, he's a turd. Like, wise janitors talk, he's a turd.
And science talk. P is less than 0.05. That's a turd, y'all. You absolutely should just block that out. And even if that thing talking to you is in your own head, that little voice, block it out. It's wrong. Like, it's gotta be fine. The only negative to making the above mistakes is if you don't learn from them. But I'm hoping that with the framework we kind of mentioned above, maybe I'm hoping at least a couple of people out there might be able to avoid beating themselves up like that. You might be able to take these and save yourself some of the growing pains and the troubles that at least John and I had, because there wasn't a whole lot of talk about this subject when I first got into this.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, when I first started this hobby, I was looking at like pictures in White Dwarf or like models at my local game store, and I was looking how great they were. And I distinctly remember being younger when I first picked up like models, built them and painted them, and they looked like crap. And so I went and compared them to like stuff I saw in a White Dwarf or like at the store, and I got so disheartened, and I had nobody like in a community to tell me like, hey, yeah, that just kind of happens, dude. Like, and so I kind of gave up. I gave up for years, and I'd hate to see anyone else do that for those reasons. I'd hate to see somebody give up on this hobby because they feel like they're not good enough. You can get good enough. We're here telling you, if you got nobody else in your community telling you that like you can improve, you can. Just be patient with yourself. It's like tackle it like a problem in that, what can I do? What techniques can I pick up to improve my painting? What little tricks can I bring to the table to improve my ability to remember rules? There's always something to do. And I'm sure I can speak for Joe in this for a second, in that if you're having trouble like figuring out how to grow from your failures, you can just hit us up on Twitter, Instagram, or wherever our social medias are. We'll talk to you. We'll have a conversation with you about it. Happily do. I mean, we can go back and forth in the DMs and help you specifically, you know, with whatever your particular problems are. You know, when we make these episodes, we try to kind of brainstorm as much of the common things as we can, but I'm sure there are plenty of scenarios that we missed, that we glazed right over. And if you're really struggling with something that we just
didn't have the foresight to put in here, let us know. I'm more than happy to look at it again. That's fine. Because really, the whole point of this little podcast journey that we're on is to try to build a community of supportive people to keep everybody moving forward in the hobby. And if you need that, more than happy to provide it.
Absolutely. Like, we're here to have a good time, and for us, we can't have a good time unless our friends are also having a good time. And I love making new friends in this hobby because I'm a huge fan. So let's all just have a good time.
It validates my plastic addiction, and I need that validation. I crave it.
To crave the validation.
Okay, Palpatine.
I'm sorry.
I think that pretty much signals the end of our cogent thoughts.
Yeah.
But, just kind of before we wrap this up, just throwing it out there again, I know in our earlier episodes, we didn't have some of the social media stuff set up. But now that is not the case. We're on there. We're doing stuff. We're moving forward. And really honestly, if you have any questions or if you have even ideas for a future episode, reach out to us there. Instagram, Twitter, YouTube comment section. We check them and we'll take any requests or thoughts that you have. And who knows, maybe one of your specific requests will end up in as a future episode all on its own. And I think that would be a really cool way to help people with some of their particular issues, is to maybe put it into its own episode. At least I think that'd be pretty useful.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's lots of things that we're probably not seeing. I mean, we are just kind of like two dudes who have our own life experiences, and other people have different life experiences. And if that's something that you'd like us to talk about, or like think about, even like if we don't think about it, just hit us up with it. Like,
yeah, I think that'd be great. And moving on from here, we have one more episode in our sort of new player's guide to tabletop wargaming. We got one more for you, and it's a big one. It's my favorite one. It's the one I'm most looking forward to, and I cannot wait to get it recorded and get it out for you guys next week. I think it's going to be a really fun one, and it's a nice way to kind of put a bow on this 10-episode series that hopefully from this point on can act as a sort of self-contained guide that we could put together in maybe like a playlist that you could send to other folks down the line. If you end up coming across somebody new who's getting into the hobby for the first time. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Maybe. Yeah. Foreshadowing. Yeah. But John, I think that's all for today. Any other final thoughts?
No, I think that we've covered quite a bit on this episode, and I'm very excited as well for next episode. I think you guys are actually going to like it, so.
Yeah, we'd wear party hats and stuff, but, not a visual medium, but we'll wear
maybe in the future we'll be a visual medium, and then we'll wear party hats.
Ooh, spicy. Yeah, we'll see. We probably have to get more than, 3 listeners.
Yeah.
But for you 3 out there, just know, we appreciate you fiercely.
Absolutely. And, I think that's probably about the end of this episode, so why don't you lead us out, Joe?
I guess I'll say the thing. Well, y'all, that's been all of our opinions. Bonafide, Kentucky Fried. We'll see y'all next time.
See ya.